we're going to open up a new type of project. Okay, so the projects we've been working in so far are called console projects. Okay, and what you've seen so far is just text, input and output. Okay, but now what we're going to do is start building Windows apps with all the elements that we have now, basically things that you can use the mouse with. Okay, so we're going to have to learn a couple of concepts that are extensions of the things we've learned so far, and I'll take you through them, and we'll build just a quick little application that matches one of the examples in your textbook. And I'll try and point out and show you some of the more important elements. Okay, so a lot of the programming remains the same, right? So when you do your calculations, that part is still the same. But now instead of printing out to the console, what we're going to be doing is changing the text of a label or something like this. Okay, so open up Visual Studio. Wait for a moment. Okay, so we want to start a new project. We can go to File, New, if we want, or you can click New Project there. And we want to pick a Windows Form application. Okay, instead of Console application, pick Windows Form application. Okay, and then again, make sure you remember where you're saving your project file, your solution. So remember, your project file is different than your source code files, which some of you were realizing last week, right? So you don't open up your source code files. You open up your project files, because soon you're going to start making programs that have more than one source file. Right? And so you'd open up your project file, and that has these source files linked in. Okay, so make sure I'm going to make another directory here. So this is class 3. I'm going to select this folder. Okay, and we'll just call this first form. You guys can call it whatever you'd like. But make sure you know something like Lab 3, something that's meaningful to you. Okay? And then we just click OK. So that's going to create our first form project. Okay? So notice right away there's going to be a couple of, or there may not, I'll show you how to, you may have to hide or show some windows depending on how your Visual Studio is set up. But you should see a couple of new things. So first of all, you should see this blue square here. Right? It should say form there, and it should look like a typical window that you see in Windows, right? And you're also probably going to see a toolbar on the left side. So it may be hidden. It may be there may be a little link that you click to expose the toolbar, or you may have to go to View and then click on Toolbox. Sorry. To pop out the toolbox. Okay. So what this toolbox and this is called the design view here. What this is a WYSIWYG editor. Okay. What's a WYSIWYG? Does anyone know what a WYSIWYG is? Anyone? So it's an acronym. Does anyone know what that? So it's WYSIWYG. Does anyone know what that acronym stands for? No? Okay, let me give you a clue. First word. What?
What you see is what you get.
There you go. Okay? So WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. Okay? So that means, for example, Microsoft Word itself. Everyone's used Word before, I hope. This is a WYSIWYG editor, right? Because what I see on my editor is what comes out on paper. Right? Word wasn't always like that. It used to look more simple. It used to be just text, and it would have markup text all around the text. So it wasn't you'd have to know how to read code a little bit to determine what would actually come out on paper, right? But so Word is a WYSIWYG editor, and so is Visual Studio, right? So we can edit this interface. This is going to be our interface, the part that we interact with, right? We can now edit this using WYSIWYG techniques, drag and drop techniques, right? Okay, so again, look also on the right side here. You'll notice it looks similar to our console project, right? So we have our file called program.cs, and you'll notice it looks a little bit different. The main function is a little bit different. You don't have to worry about that for form projects. This file is primarily just the Kickstarter file. It just starts everything up. So you won't really have to. You won't be editing this program file much. Probably not in this course, at least. Okay. Then notice we have another file here called form. Okay, and that's a special class. That's a CS file, just like all the CS files we've been working on so far. But it's a special CS file that represents a Windows form, like this, right? So this box here, that's a Windows form. Okay, so if we let's press this little arrow, this triangle here, to expand what we have inside form, because there's actually two parts to the form. Right? So right now we're looking at designer view, and that's the WYSIWYG view, right? But we can also look at the code view, right? So a lot of the code is hidden away, but you'll want access to it at future points in your development. Okay? So for example, if you expand this, you'll see more code that so when we start dropping in elements into this WYSIWYG editor, it's going to generate code, right? So anything we do in the WYSIWYG, we can do the equivalent just by typing out code. Okay, so we're going to see there'll be a combination of using the WYSIWYG and then going in and editing some of the code. Okay. So let's drop our first let's run the program, right? Remember last time when we ran the program, the console app just sort of appeared and disappeared. But let's try it now. So this is the empty, this is our empty program, right? So everyone run that and make sure you have that. So you should have this blank form now, right? So you can minimize it, you can maximize it, and you should be able to close it. But other than that, that's it. So that's the base. We haven't even done anything yet, and we get all that, right? So notice on the left here, this is our toolbox. So this is where we can pick UI elements to drag in to use, right? So what we do is, I think the first thing we want is we want a label. Okay, so a label is just basically text. So what we do is we click and drag the label to a spot on our form where we want the label to be. Okay? Did everyone do that? Okay? Okay, so now notice we can click on the label, and so this panel here on the right now, it's changed a little bit. This is our panel window, and this panel here will tell us about properties of the elements that we select, right? So for example, if we click here, the name of the label. So remember, so variables have at least three aspects, right? They have a type, they have a name, and they have a value, right? So these elements that we're dragging on here, they're variables, just like an int, just like a double, except they're fancy variables. They're variables that can do user interface stuff, right? They don't just store information, they do other things. So for example, this label has a name just like any other variable, right? And the name of the label is label1. Okay? That's one characteristic. So we're looking in the properties window, right? Let's look at, so we can just scroll through here and see a bunch of other properties. So here's font. So this is the, we could change the style of font in the label very easily just by using the WYSIWYG, right? We can change the size and the type, and that changes our label, right? We can move down more. So now we see it's stored its location, right? So this label, starting from 0, 0 at the top left, this is the coordinate of the label, 126 by 169. So as I change, I can just click and drag the position and it changes the value here. Or I can go in here, I can change the value of the text there, of the number there, and then it moves accordingly on the screen. Right? Let's look at a couple of other properties. So here's an important one. So the one called text. So that property defines what's being shown in the label, right? So if I delete this and say this is my label, then that's what's going to appear on my label, in my label, right? So everyone, change the text value in your label. Change it to something else. Okay? So click on the label and then find the text property in the properties window and then change the text. Okay? So has everyone done that? Let me know if you are having issues. Is everyone? Let me know if you're still having issues. The text. So I clicked on the label, and then I went to my properties window. And I went to the text property, and then I just clicked in here and changed it. So right, so I changed it there, and then it changed over here as well. Oh, change the font? Okay, so that again, that's just a property. So that's, if we go up here, we can go to font, and then it's actually, there's a bunch of properties, so we can expand it. But we'll click on this control right here, and then we can pick the font. Right? It just like in Microsoft Word. Right? Was there a question? Yep.
Yes, sorry. How do you make it stretch out like you guys do?
Well, it was just because I made the font really big.
Oh, okay.
You can't. It's not like vector graphics. You can't just increase the size. In order to increase the size, go to font and then change the font size.
Oh, okay. All right,
So change it to 20 or something, right? And then it will get bigger. Okay, does anyone still not have a custom-made label? So now, run your program. Okay, there we go. So you should have this, something like this, right? Okay. So let's take a look at the files now that we've created. So we can look inside Form Designer, and so now look at all this. Remember, there wasn't any code here before. So when we drag this label in here, Visual Studio automatically inserted all this code here. So this is like, can anyone tell me what's happening here? What is this? Label equals new. I guess that's a little advanced, but essentially we're declaring a variable, right? Remember, like int number equals 6. So in this case, we're saying label 1 equals a new variable called type label, right? And then we're setting a bunch of. So see here, we can change the text by changing the code in our CS file. See, in our designer.cs file. So if I change this to my name, Carmen Branje, and go back to the designer, it's going to change, right? So there are usually two ways to do something in Visual Studio. We can do it through the design view in the WYSIWYG editor and edit the properties, or we can click on the design CS file, the designer CS file, and edit the actual C# code. Okay? Okay, so let's do something. So far, we haven't done anything too interesting, but let's get a button in the mix. Okay, so we'll go back to our toolbox, and now we're going to drag over a button. Okay, so let me know if you can do that. Everyone got a button? So a button we can just make bigger by clicking on the squares and making it bigger. Okay, so let's, again, when we click on button, all the properties are going to show up here in the properties window. Okay, so for example, what's the name of this button? What is this button called? Button 1, right? Because we can see that right here. Okay, but that's actually, remember, that's different than from what text is in the button. So let's say if I change this to this, have I changed the name of the button? Have I changed the name of the button? No. The name is still, even though the button says press me, the name of the button is still button 1. Okay? Okay, so now, does everyone have a button that says something? Make it say something, something funny. Press me is the funniest thing I could come up with. It's admittedly not very funny. Okay, so once you've done that, sorry, go back to the design view. So now what we want to do is we're going to we're going to jump ahead a little bit. I'm going to jump ahead of you guys a little bit, but that's okay. You guys are going to come with me. So what we're going to do is we're going to assign an event handler. Okay, so an event is something that happens in a Windows form. So when I click on this button, there's going to be an event that happens called button click. Okay? And what we can do is we can assign some code to run when that event occurs. Okay? So if we want to print a message or something, we can make that happen when someone presses the button. Okay? So the real Visual Studio makes it really easy, and the way we can access the code that will handle the button press event is we double click on our button. Okay? So double click on your button and you should be taken to a page with some code now. Okay? Okay. So you guys haven't learned functions yet, right? Or methods? So I know this is a little bit ahead, but it's kind of just the way it is with some of this stuff. You have to learn things. There's not really a perfectly sequential order that you can learn these things in. We kind of have to jump ahead a little bit from time to time. So what a function or a method is it's a block of code, right? A bunch of code that you want to run at certain points in your program. Okay? So this text right here, that's the function that will run when you press the button, right? When you press the button 1, their code, whatever code you put between these two brackets here, will be run. Okay? So I'm going to show you a command that's sort of like console.writeLine. What does console.writeLine do? What does it do? It prints text to the console, right? So we do have a console. There is a console in the IDE, but for all intents and purposes, we don't have a console when we do a form project. So what we want to do is we want to pop up a little alert message. So what we can do is we say message box. So we're going to access a special class, a built-in class. And again, I know you haven't learned objects or classes yet, but again, just bear with me. This will all make sense in the near future. So we're going to, in the class message box, there's a method called show. And what that does is it's going to pop up an alert menu for us. And show takes in a type string. Okay? So we in between the brackets, we're going to pass in a string, and that's going to be the message that appears in the box. So in between these two quotations, we can put our message, like, you just pressed the button, champ. Okay? So you put whatever message you want, and now we'll run it. We're going to run our program. Okay? So now what do you think is going to happen when I click press me? What's going to happen? So look, this message box pops up and says my message, right? Because it runs that function, that bit of code there. Okay? Okay. Is everyone still with me? Everyone understands what we did, right? So the computer can register events. There are other events. There are probably at least 24 events, right? Things like, so there's mouse up, mouse down, mouse move, mouse enter, mouse leave, button click, all these events that you can tie functions to, right? So you can really make some sophisticated interfaces using these events. Okay, so let's close our program. So here, let's go back to the design view. So the way we do that is we right-click on Form and we say View Designer, and we'll go back to our design view. Okay, so let's do something else. Let's drop in another little bit. Let's drop in a text box. Okay, so find where in your toolbox, find where text box is. Okay, and drag it, click and drag it in. Okay, so can someone tell me what the name of that text box is? What's the name? Someone find the name. How would you find the name of it? Yep. Text box 1. How did you know that? Sorry, I can't hear you. I'm getting old. I'm growing deaf. What? Yes. So you click on the element and then you go to the properties menu and it's right up here, name, text box 1. Okay? So let's do something now. So now what we can do now is we can reference these elements in our code just like we can reference variables. Right? So remember in our lab we were adding and assigning values to variables? Okay? Well, the properties of the text box are variables just like the ints and doubles that we were working with. Okay? And we can manipulate them using C# code. Okay? So let's do this. Let's, again, double click on our message box. Okay? And so remember, from here in our form, we can access the elements that we dragged into our form, right? So we can, what are the elements that we have, the UI elements? We have a button, we have a label, and we have a text box, right? So what was the name of the text box again? What was the name of the text box? Text box 1. So what we do is we type text box 1. Okay, see, and even it gives us a hint there. Right halfway down this little list, it gives us text box 1. Okay? So remember, text box 1 is a variable, but it's not a simple variable, it's a complex variable. And it doesn't only have just a value, it has many, many, many things. So one of the things it has is what someone has typed in the text box. Right? And the way we access all the properties in that object is we use the dot. So we press dot, and then Visual Studio is going to list all of these properties and methods that we can access from text box. Okay? It would be the same thing with label. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So what we want is we want to get the text from the text box. We want that to appear in the alert message box that pops up. Right? So what we do is we access the text property. Right? And what we're going to do, we're going to select this variable, this object and this property, and we're going to cut it. So we're going to right click and cut it, and we're going to paste it in here where this hard-coded string is. we're going to paste it right there. Okay? So what that is going to do is, so now go back to our design view. So when I click press me, that's going to take whatever text is in this text box and it's going to put it in the message box that pops up. Right? So let's go back to our CS file, or let's just run the program now. Okay, so let's run it. And let's type in A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So what's going to appear in the message box when I click press me? What's going to appear in the message box? Whatever's here, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay? So see how we can access the properties of those objects? Okay, let's do something else now. Let's, instead of printing to the message box, so I'm going to comment out this line of code by putting 2 slashes. So that's going to comment out the code. So this is like the code is deleted now. This code won't run anymore. Okay? So let's say we want to change, instead of printing the text box text in a message box, we want to change the label. We want to change the text of the label. How do you think we might do that? Any guesses? So this is our button press event handler. So we're going to put the code in here. So how might we change the text of the label? How might we do that? What was the name of the label? Yeah, label 1, right? That's the name of our label, remember? And then .text, yep, that's good, because that's the property that displays the text. And then what's the rest of it? What would we say? Equals quotation? Well, we want to put the text from the text box. Yep, but you don't need the brackets. Oops, and I spelled label wrong. Okay? So what's that going to do now? When we run our program, so if I type hello world, what's going to happen when I press me? What's going to happen? Yeah, so remember, this is label 1, and it's going to change the value of it. So now it says hello world. Okay? So see how we did that? Okay, so let's do a quick little calculator. Okay? So, we're going to create our user interface. So we'll go back to the design view up here. We'll click Form 1 Design. Okay? And we'll move this text box over here, and we'll drag in another text box. Okay? And we'll drag in 2 more labels. And this label, so the other way we can change the text is, I think we can just right click, or no, we have to go over here. We have to go to text, and then so we'll change the first label to number 1. Okay? And we're going to change the second label to number 2. Okay? And we're going to move this button down. And then we're going to have a second label, a third label here. Oops, that's a link label. We want just a regular label. We'll change that text to be some. Okay. And we'll put another label here, and we'll change that to 0. Does everybody have that? Is everyone following along? I went a little quick there. I'll just give you a second to catch up. Yeah, well, you could use a label or a text field if you want. It's up to you. Okay, so now let's make a little calculator so that this is going to add the two numbers together. So let's change the label of the text to add two numbers. Okay, and then so how do we get to the button event handler? Double click on the button. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to have the number in text box 1 and the number in text box 2, we want to add those together and put the results in the label where we're going to put the answer. Okay? So the first thing, there are a couple of ways to do it, but the way I would do it is I would first create two integer variables, because let's say, well, this is an integer calculator. Okay? So how do we define an integer? How do we do it though? What do I type? I want to define an integer. How do we define an integer? Int, yeah. So we type int int because that's the type, and then we'll say let's call it number 1. Okay? And what we want to do now is we want to take the text from text box 1 text. Okay. Now the thing is, now take a look at this. So Visual Studio helps you out a lot. So let's put the mouse over the text property. So see there it says string textbox.text. What do you think that means? What do you think? So first of all, what does string mean? What is a string? Sorry? It's a variable type, right, that you can store text in. So can you put a string into an integer variable? Can you do that? No, you can't do that. It's not going to like that. So see here, there's a red line underneath here, and it's complaining. See, it says error. Cannot implicitly convert type string to int. Okay, you can't do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to use another class function. So we're going to use the class convert. Okay, so type convert and then decimal. And then, so this class has a whole bunch of functions that can convert all sorts of types to other types. Okay, it's called casting. So what we want to do is we'll make it into a 32-bit integer, and then we have to put the bit of string that we want into the brackets around here. Okay, so what that's going to do is that's going to take the string from the text in text box 1 here, and it's going to convert it into a number. And then it's going to put it into this integer. Okay? So how do I want to declare another integer that's going to do the same thing for the other text box. Right? So what I can do is, because it's pretty much the same thing, you can just copy and paste. And then we'll just change the required parts. Right? So what do I have to change here? Yeah, let's change this to number 2 and text box 2. Okay? So now we want a third variable. Okay? Let's call that variable sum. And then how do I store the sum of number 1 and number 2 into this sum variable? How do I do that? How do I do that? Yeah, number 1 plus number 2, right? Doesn't get any easier than that. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Okay? So, now what we want to do, what did we say we wanted to do, right? We wanted, I said, we wanted I want the sum of whatever's in here and here to be displayed here. So, how do we do that? How would we get the value in here? So first of all, what is this element and what's it called? What's that element called? Label 5, right? And it's a label, obviously. So let's go back. We'll go to our button handler by double-clicking on the button. And so we have the sum now. We've added up the value, but now we want to display the value. So how am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? Sorry? Read line? No, that's for the console. That's for getting some text from the console. Right? Sorry? No, that's also console. That's printing out to the console. So what we want to do, we want to access a property of the label object. So how do we do that? Remember, we were accessing the text property of text box 1 here, right? So how do we access the text property of label 1? Or sorry, label 5. Yeah. Label what? 5 dot text equals what? Sum. Okay. So it's probably going to complain about that. So what do you think it's going to say now? What do you think the error is going to be? Yeah, it's a bad type. See? Cannot implicitly type int to string. It can't go the other way either. So what we have to do is, so remember I said int is not only a variable, it's an object. So int comes with some methods as well, right? So if I type sum dot, there's a function here called toString, which will return the string value of sum. And that'll go into here. Okay? So let's run it. Let's run it. Okay? So if I type 5 and 4 and add 2 numbers, yay! We got it. Okay? So let me know who has that. Who doesn't have the? Oh, I see some errors. What does the error say? Remember the errors appear in the error window at the bottom of your screen. Visual Studio tries to help you, right? Is everybody, who doesn't have their calculator going yet? You know? Okay, no problem. Okay, so look at the, so it says system conversion non-continuous application. So look at, yeah, so see there, so it says convert dot to int32. And brackets. What does it say? What's the error say? See, we didn't make it so that it checks to make sure you enter them. Did you enter a letter? Oh, see your text box. You have 3 text boxes. See, like one up here. That's called text box 2. One here, that's text box 1. This is text box 3. And in your code, you were referencing text box 2, which is up here, right? It's up here. It's your row text box. So get rid of this one. Put this one away. Okay. What's it say? Okay, so it's just this part here.
See, it's called label war. Even though the text in there says label 5, the actual value. So now if you
Go up to text. Yeah, and then into
this actually is see, you put this, all this code in another function. You want it, see when you click on the button, see this block here. This is the code that runs when you want to do that. Let's go. See, because sometimes what happens, does everybody have a calculator? Oh, what happened? Oh, you see, you're trying to take the whole text box, which is not just text, it's everything, so you have to put dot text. Question? No? See, somehow, this is the button input event. So click here, this function. So somehow you insert so whenever it runs when you type in the so you want this. Does anyone else still not have a calculator app going? Yeah. says label 5 is not existing. So go back to your this is label you want to. So you want to take whatever here. Yeah. So that this thing is called label 1. Right? So in there you have label 5. So you want to check this one. Anyone else? What's that? Oh. See, okay. You might double click on the label, which created a label clicking event. So you want this text right here, and then you'll realize you see that text box text change. So that's an event that runs whenever you change text. So you want the button. It takes us to this button. So yep, not working. Is that it? There it is. It's just you don't have any text. So it's there, but there's no text. Sorry? Oh, just go to because you need, because this is a function, and so you need, when you call a function, you need anyone else to change that? Oh, so go to the toolbox and then drag some labels. So actually, click on that. Right there. Yes, click that. There you go. So now drag over the label from here over there and change the labels. Okay, so I saw a couple of people made the same mistake, and that was, so remember the way we added an event handler to the button is we double clicked on the button, and then we got the block of code that will run when you click the button. But some of you accidentally double clicked on, say, the label, which does the same thing. So what you're doing is you're creating an event handler for clicking on the label, right? You can program the program to do anything, right? Even though it's standard to use buttons for people to click on, you can have people click on labels if you really wanted to. Okay? So some of you were actually putting your code in a label click event handler. So you were pressing the button, and the block of code you thought was supposed to run wasn't running. Okay? So any questions so far? Does everyone have that little bit up to there? Yeah? Okay, one other thing I'm going to show you now is, so in future labs, what I'm going to get you to do is, so let's say if I give you 3 or 4 questions, I'm going to get you to create one solution, one like project file, and then multiple projects within that solution file. Right? I probably should have shown you that first thing last week. But so remember the thing we created when we first started, that's the project file, right? That's different than your CS files. So now that you're doing form projects, if you just submit the CS file, especially only program.cs, it's not going to make any sense, okay? So what I want you to do is
So remember, pay attention to where you saved your project file. So I saved it on the desktop somewhere in here, class 3 forms, and this is my project. So make sure you compress the entire directory and submit all your projects and all your files together as one file. Okay? So the way you can add multiple projects so that you can compile different streams of code is this is your project here, this is your solution, and it has one project in it. So, and this is our first project. So we can right click on it and go to add, and then we can add a new project. Okay? So let's say we want to do another form application. So we could say second form app, or something like that. Okay? So now we have two solutions, two projects in one solution. Okay? So see the one that's bolded here? That's the one that's going to run when we click start. Okay? So if we wanted to run, so if we click run, start, it's going to run the thing we've been working on so far, right? Our little calculator. But if we go into our Solution Explorer and we right click on this project and we say set as startup project, then that's the project that's going to run when we click start and run. So this is our blank project that we just started, right? So for the lab, let's say you would have one solution called, let's say, lab 3, and then you would have projects within each one project within those solutions that would be solving the questions in the lab. Okay. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. So I think we have about 50 minutes left. So I'm going to give you some time. Depending on how fast I see you guys go, I'll either make this due at the beginning before next lab, or I'll give you some time next lab to finish off. But it's going to work the same way. So there are new groups. I've formed new groups on eCentennial. So have a look at your group members. And then all you're doing is you're repeating lab 2, but instead of having the output go to the console, you're going to have a form project, and your output will be however you decide. You can do it. You could change the text value of a label, or you could you could use the message box .show, right? But so repeat the lab, but within a form project. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions about that? So what was I was just going to do something. What was I going to do? Yeah, so go to eCentennial, find your groups, and get started. And see if you guys can finish up by 6:20. Because a lot of the code you should be able to just take directly from your previous lab, right? It's the same logic, it's just the display, the presentation is a little bit different. Okay? So find out your group members, get together with your groups, and let's see if you guys can be finished for 6:20, and then you'll be free and clear for the weekend and next week. Okay? Okay. Go to it. Are you waiting for the horn?